A packed agenda this evening. Our first item, I did receive an email from Safety Service Director, Mr. Powers, regarding a version of the city's mission, vision, values, and goals, and that has been distributed to all members of council. Mr. Powers, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today. So, the city right now does not have a set of mission, vision, values, and goals that have been passed by council or given a resolution. And that's something that gets asked for a lot when we go for like grant applications. It's also just a really good unifying thing so that we can kind of focus that back as we look at all sorts of different projects. So what I wanted to do is kind of put this before you. This was something that Mike Skelly and I have worked on. So it is really just kind of the two of us putting some thoughts together on paper. There is no pride in authorship here, so feel free to say this is terrible, do it again. Or, if there are parts that we like, parts that we don't like, but we wanted to bring something here and have a little bit more of an informal discussion about it before we brought something and asked council to put some resolution of approval to it.
Mr. Powers,
Yes.
what would you like from us right now?
I'm basically just looking for some general feedback. So what I'd like to be able to do is at an upcoming council meeting, put this in as sort of an official resolution for council to offer an endorsement on it. And then, this would be something that we would add to the city's website, but then we would use it as we look at, developing projects, give us something to kind of harken back to. And it's just sort of a shared focal point for the different elected offices, but also all of, the police department, the fire department, public works. Kind of gives us a little bit of something to ground us together.
I was really happy with it. I like, for folks at home, the values are professionalism, respect, integrity, mission-driven, equitable, and resourcefulness. I feel like Norwood has been really resourceful in the last however many decades. I'm just curious about like the process, how you came to this as the final product.
So I kind of just worked from top to bottom. Started off with a mission statement, and then tried to develop a set of values that are both applicable and set up in a way that they're kind of easy to remember. And, in some ways it's not government if we haven't made an acronym out of it.
I was going to say, this is very federal government coded right now.
It very much is, yes. But it is a useful tool to help people to remember those things as you go forward, because the values aren't helpful if you can't remember what they are. So there's some reasons to do things like that. So with the values, then kind of went back up to write the vision on it and then come up with the goals that are kind of broad-based enough that they're generally applicable. There are not as many goals here as there are departments in the city. Mm-hmm. So there's something for everybody to be working on toward this. Mike and I kind of put our heads together, Mike Skelly that is, and did some editing on this, went over it with the mayor and got this to a point where we felt we were comfortable bringing it in as a discussion item and something to kind of help us get through without just sitting down and saying, what should these be? And then trying to have a committee do it all together, because the writing can be difficult as a committee. The editing is much easier as a committee.
The only thing I feel like I would like to see added is something about either like ensuring or providing for Norwood's future.
Okay.
Like something about
Planning for the future.
long-term planning for the future. And I don't think we need to address the acronym because I think it's great. And an acronym
New
is hard to
acronyms
come
can
up
always,
with.
we can always come up with new acronyms.
But I think maybe as like an added goal bullet point, or maybe just an added word in the mission, like to promote and foster the safety, prosperity, longevity, and well-being of Norwood, or future, or something about there being
Direction.
Yes.
Sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is very important, not just with budget, but also trying to plan ahead for how we best safeguard the infrastructure, the safety that we have for the future.
Absolutely. That makes sense to me. I'll find some way to wordsmith that together.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned either in the mission or the goals. Is it just something that you would like to see worked in here generally, or do you want it in one of those particular places?
I don't feel strongly one way or another, just
Okay.
as long as it's included somewhere.
All right.
Would it be helpful for grant applications if we talk about the future? Do we think that would sway people?
I do think it's helpful when you do those grant applications that it be something that's, it's short because you don't want them to have to spend a ton of time thinking about that, but you do want them to understand that it's something you've thought about, because every grant application just about has one of these attached.
Yep. Just something that shows that we have put time and effort into this, and we intend therefore to use what resources you're going to give us, grant or
Yeah.
giving organization
And
well.
this does kind of provide a building block too, if we look at, generating future larger plans. I know there's been some discussions about comprehensive planning. It is a place to kind of start that conversation too.
So just trying to make sure we can always link it back to one of these, something here.
Absolutely.
So it's not, we don't get too far afield. I think that's a helpful way. 'Cause keeping the focus narrowed is the best way to actually get things done.
Great.
On the goals, and on that note, it seems to me that if we're going to work on number 5 on our agenda, the master plan, that we should align goals in the master plan. And so I think, as you said, anything that is in the master plan should be able to fall underneath one of these goals.
We could even use that as in the eventual master plan saying okay, this is all about ensuring the safety of Norwood residents and businesses. And here's how we talk about public safety, et cetera.
You can almost use that as the outline.
Yeah, like the outline. Yes,
Various
thank you.
sections.
I couldn't think of the word outline. Yes, so.
Then, second point, Mr. Powers. This is not an intellectual argument. I have an emotional reaction to the word prosperity for some reason. I can't give you a good intellectual argument, and if I'm the only one that doesn't like that, then take that for a grain of salt. But for some reason, that word just sits odd with me.
Okay. Do you have a word that you
I mean,
just don't like that one?
well, right, and so I'm
Understood.
not going to die on this hill, but I looked up other ones like flourish and thriving are as synonyms, but I see why you picked prosperity. I'm not critical of that. I'm just not a fan of that word for some reason.
It's like the word moist.
Nobody likes that word.
Unless,
I'm going to add that in the report.
please.
Moist makes it into our mission statement. I think we need to zoom out a little bit. Yeah.
I think it's an appropriate concept to be in there, so I'm not challenging that.
Okay, I understand.
I think it looks great.
I think it's a good start.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can come up with a better way to say that or a different way to say that, and I will address adding some sort of future aspect to this, and then I'll put something together and bring that in the future. Would you like me just to bring that back with those edits already made as some kind of resolution, or would you like me to come back to the committee of the whole and discuss that further?
I feel pretty good about its current.
Yeah, I think just having a resolution is fine.
Okay.
I would vote for it as a resolution, even with prosperity in it. It's good enough that I don't want to see you spin your wheels on this whenever there's other things to do.
I appreciate that. All right.
I second that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda. I know we've had, I think, every meeting so far, possibly we've discussed community survey.
Quite everyone.
Committee of the whole, I think so.
Oh, maybe.
Pretty close.
Well, Sam Bowling and I were going to spend time on this, and frankly, we didn't get together, but I spent a little bit of time on my own as she did on her own. And then it dawned on me that John Moore did this phenomenal survey just a few years ago. And so I revisited it, and it's really pretty amazing. I encourage anyone at home to check it out. His website is movenorwoodforward.com. He is a resident who just did this on his own for kicks, which probably tells us more about him than we need to know. But I would love for you to come up and share the survey that you did And our hope is that we can take from that, and maybe this would be a really good starting point for us as we move forward.
Sure. Thank you. Don't need to be recognized or,
No, we are.
All right, well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here. John Moore, 2219 out of Bow. As Councilwoman Hoover said, work on movenorwoodforward.com. And back in 2020, did this survey. And so I have a PowerPoint that I did a number of years ago that was, when it was, let's say, 95, 97% done. I'll walk you through that. And then I basically just have some notes on like 5 buckets, sort of how it came to be, what some of the results were, insights, proposed uses for you all, and then what I would do differently if I were to do it again now. So if that sounds good, I think at that time that was leading into the 2020 election, and I think that like just the political discourse in general was pretty frothy, and so I was interested just to like if we brought data to what people were talking about related to the city, what would that look like? And so set out to make this survey and just try to bring some objective perspective. And just to give you a little bit of a background on sort of what it was and what it covered. Basically, it was a 51 question survey that was 35 multiple choice checkbox or 16 qualitative. So literally just, hey, tell me what you think about X, Y, or Z aspect. Topics covered, you can see there, but it was pretty wide ranging as far as your neighborhood, police and fire, roads, schools, Montgomery Road corridor, things like that. And as far as like the distribution of it, I am just a guy who was doing this, and I thought, well, I probably can't mail 9,000 of them or whatever the number is. And so given where we were at that time, there were lots of people that had political signs in their yards, things like that. And so with 2 neighbors and my wonderful wife, we dropped about 1,000 of these flyers that basically pointed people to say, hey, you're invited to come do this. There were about 206 responses is how many we got, so about 20% uptake on that. And I think that was basically the gist. So as far as some of the results go, the like who did it and whatnot, there ended up being 206 respondents. The breakout by ward was Ward 1, 26% of total respondents, Ward 2, 36%, Ward 3, 19%, Ward 4, 17%. Some of the demographics that I picked up throughout it, 89% were homeowners. There was kind of a balanced mix of, I'm in my first 5 years in Norwood, I'm 5 to 20 years in Norwood, or I'm 20 or more years in Norwood. 29% had a school-age kid, 62% had watched or attended a city council meeting. So that's definitely high, but given the nature of who received them, makes sense. It was interesting, as I did the drops, I was kind of keeping a mental score. It seemed like it was sort of 50-50 of like, this is a Biden house, this is a Trump house. But it ended up being about 2/3 who self-identified as being progressive or somewhat progressive who responded to it. So that's a call out to be aware of. And then as far as the actual, like how I went about thinking about it, most of the like multiple choice questions or checkbox questions were strongly disagree, neither agree nor disagree, somewhat agree, or strongly agree. And so I used that approach to kind of tabulate, like, if you use like a net promoter score model, which is basically like take all your people who are like in favor and subtract all the people who are against, what does that number kind of come out to? And that was how I sifted through it in terms of results. So as we look at this is the 6 things that people collectively liked about Norwood. The next slide is the dislikes. So large number of people feel safe. They feel like things are improving. They're supportive of a tax levy for roads. They are approving of the fire department, seeing themselves here in Norwood in 5 years or more into the future, and then wanting more walkable businesses. Those are the things that had kind of the most consensus on the affirmative side. On the collective dislike side, the roads, no surprise, big collective dislike for that. Montgomery Road being a poor reflection on the city, not trusting the city to use tax money wisely, the quality of parks, and the quality of dining options. And then what was, I think, really interesting as I put myself in your all's shoes was the ability to like parse out differences between wards around certain topics. And so, again, I think on the low end, there were maybe like 35 or so respondents per ward. I think on the high, there were maybe like 60-ish in raw numbers. So just for context, this isn't the biggest sample size, but matters that had greatest deviation. So in this case, what I looked at was basically what's the ward that has the lowest sort of net promoter score about a thing, and what is the ward that has the highest net promoter score about a thing. And then kind of that difference, that disparity was how they were ranked in this particular presentation. So the matters that had the greatest deviation, usage of Wasson Way. So Ward 1 and Ward 2, big fans. Ward 3 and Ward 4, not so much, which makes geographic sense as far as why that would be. Neighborhood cleanliness, basically everyone except Ward 1 felt pretty good about that. Ward 1 was kind of equal number of like promoters and detractors. Sense of community, again, you see kind of the first 3 wards there, pretty high scores. Ward 4 had a lower rating. Park usage, you know, you can kind of see as they go through here. And then what I was able to parse out was like ward by ward scores as far as their kind of overall assessment of living in these communities or in these parts of Norwood. And so in this case, just as a quick like FYI, so in like depending on industries, like if you're in fast food or you're in telecom or you're in whatever industry, like a 30 or 40 is kind of like a good score if you think about like the percentage of people who support your business versus like minus the percentage of people who dislike your business. And so as we go through this, you'll see that there's some numbers that are closer to 0, and then there's some numbers that are more in that like 30 to 40% kind of range. So, you know, if I look at this as a representative of any given ward, I can see, okay, well, you know, for Ward 1 was above average in park usage, Wasson Way usage, sense of community, but then what was lacking in Ward 1 came through as sort of lack of cleanliness, lower overall average rating, lower esteem for the police department, and then sort of less trust in the city's use of tax money. And then just to layer in, to like double click in here, for example, the like rating of the police department, there's actually like a qualitative piece attached to the survey that says, you know, hey, these are suggestions of like what I wish the police department would do differently. So specifically from this ward that sort of under-indexed on police favorability, they said, hey, I want you to walk and bike the neighborhood more and meet the neighbors, you know, get more diverse and work with the city on budget issues, so on and so forth. And so you can imagine this being useful to the police chief as well. And then so on and so forth. I won't necessarily dive into each of them, but you can see, for example, that the Ward 2 net promoter score was pretty high, hinging on like Wasson Way, cleanliness, things like that. But then sort of conversely, like lower satisfaction with walkable businesses, lower satisfaction for like quality of relationships, like sense of community and neighbor. Ward 3 plus 28%, and then Ward 4 3%. So that's kind of some of the like results and insights, if you will. You know, I think as we think about like proposed uses for the city, I think really just like understanding, you know, what people want and giving it to them, and then sort of documenting that journey towards delivering the thing they asked for. Personally, I think realizing that the different parts of the city have different needs. You know, I heard somebody talk about a strategic plan, but in my brain, it's almost like there should be like citywide types of initiatives, but then there should be like sort of a forward kind of thing of like, all right, what's the Ward 1 objectives? What's the Ward 2 objectives? What's the Ward 3 objectives that are sort of driven by the individual council members based on this? I think particularly, I just used Google Forms for this. So this wasn't like some epic production value. But one of the things that I think could be really interesting is to ask a question like, how likely are you to see yourself here in 5+ years? And if you actually mapped that, and you could see, oh, for whatever reason, all these people that live in this part of Norwood really don't see themselves, here in the future. Like you could identify and come up with initiatives to resolve those kinds of issues. Other potential uses, taking temperature on like proposed tax levies, development projects, things like that. And then I think just in general, like trying to find sections that ladder up to like a responsible party who can actually act on this. So like I didn't quite get there, but like to do a like police specific breakout and send that to the police chief, or do a fire specific or school specific and send those to those like area leaders. I think that could have, a lot of power. And just to be clear, this is all still just like publicly available. There's no kind of gatekeeping here. So if you come to the site, you can kind of see the like the full breakdown. And then for different questions, there are, for example, what could be done in Ward 1 to help you feel more safe in your neighborhood? You can see sort of like a selected set of responses, but then if you actually click on like the read all 31 comments submitted, that takes you to like a Google Doc that's just like Ward 1 responses, qualitative, and you can read all those if you want to. So as far as like what I would do differently if I were to do this again, I didn't go out of my way to ask about demographics. So for example, there's not like age, sex, race, like anything like that in here. I did have an online commenter tell me that basically without comprehensive data about household income and things like that they didn't think there was anything that could be gleaned and it would be inappropriate to use this to prioritize any projects. So potentially fair criticism there. Another bit of feedback I got was asking about communication preferences. So like, where do you get your news from? What are your most trusted sources? How frequently would you like to hear from the city? Things like that. There were no communication related questions. And then figuring out just like a different way to distribute it. It was literally only the flyers. And then in some cases where I think all the wards except Ward 2, I followed up. Like if you did it and said, hey, Susan, thanks so much for doing this survey. Do you have any neighbors? I'm trying to get more respondents. Do you have any neighbors you could forward this to? So I followed up with everybody from Wards 1, 3, and 4 who submitted just to try to drive some of those in-person referrals. But I didn't actively like post it online because I didn't want, there are a couple different reasons that I didn't want to do that. For example, like, one person could just do a bunch of them, that's not ideal. And so I think if there's some kind of way to, in the initial capture, to like have people enter their address or things like that, that might sort of make it like one house, one survey, that kind of thing, one address, one survey. Those are just some things that I would think about if I were doing this again. But overall, like I love this. I thought this was super interesting. I thank you all for like inviting me in. Personally, I think there was part of me that was like, if I do this and it's somewhat useful, maybe someday the city will take this on as like an ongoing thing. And so 4 years later, back from the dead, haven't thought about this in a while, and here we are. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you, I have a couple questions. About how long did it take to do the 51 questions as a?
I think I timed it, let's see. For most people, this will take less than 10 minutes, was my timing of it. I think I did it and my wife did it, and we both came in like 9:30 or 8:45 or something like that. Because I wanted to set that expectation up front because of the way it was set up. I didn't want people to,
Get halfway through and stop.
Yeah, abandon.
Yeah, a lot of the things that you mentioned too about what would change if you did it again are things that we talked about including in the survey. Likelihood of living here in 5 years. That's feedback you got because
I also really like your map, because a lot of people don't know what ward they're in. And you have on the, in the survey, it was an interactive map that had both the picture, so you could glance, but if you're like, oh, I might be on the border, there's a way to click, so you get the actual map, so you can find your actual address to make sure you're in the right ward.
Yeah, and I think like
That seems pretty important.
Tickles me that you had 4 people who still didn't know what word they were.
Yeah, so there were, let's see. So I described it. I said Ward 1 generally west of Montgomery, close to Xavier. Ward 2 generally east of Montgomery, south of Smith. But then there was an I'm not sure, and then I think there were 4 of the 200 that.
So the map wasn't on the survey? Because it's on the,
It was on the
at the
write-ups. I'm not sure. Let's see here.
There are survey software where you
I'm
can
not-
make a hot image and make that map selectable.
Yeah. So I don't think, sorry, I'm offline. I don't think I actually had it in there. I just had the written description
Okay.
of, generally east or west of Montgomery and then like north or south of the lateral.
sweet, thank you.
If you search wards in Norwood, Ohio,
Yeah.
his map comes up.
It is the first one that comes up.
Yeah.
My map?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you search like Norwood, Ohio wards, your map is the first map.
I
Look-
think that might be how I circled back to you when I was working on the survey.
That
And
one
I
is
was
What
like,
comes up first.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and this used to be on the city site, so I just screenshotted it.
It
And
takes to your
It takes-
website
yeah.
now.
The algorithm likes you first.
I must have did that alt text in there to get the SEO juice.
With the 50, I mean, part of, I'm kind of torn, so I want to hear from you guys. Part of me is like, 51, I kind of want to do, I really liked his survey, and I would really like to see how it's moved, because already it's, the needle has moved quite a bit with some of the concerns that people had, so they've already either been addressed or being addressed, or like the roads, we're working on them. So I would be really curious to see how the perception has shifted just in the last 4 years.
I
Yeah,
also think,
but is 51 too many questions?
I think aiming for a time as opposed to aiming for a number of questions is a better goal. Like a survey you can finish in 5 minutes versus, and obviously that's going to like depend on some accessibility pieces, but in general, I feel like aiming for a time instead of a number of questions.
Is less than 10 minutes appropriate to ask?
Yeah, I would say
9,000
10 minutes
people?
is the maximum. I also am not interested in doing qualitative questions because I feel like with the spread of the distribution of the survey, I do not know how we would be able to map that data, which we've discussed before. Doing open-ended questions makes me nervous for a survey like this. I want tangible yes, no, maybes, 1 to 10 data.
So some of his were, okay, it's like, dislike, that was some of the,
There were 35 of those and then 16 of the qualitative, and I don't.
oh, you didn't like any of the
No,
qualitative?
no, no.
Oh.
I like them for this. For
Okay.
our survey, I do not think that we possess the manpower to be able to navigate reporting
Gotcha.
that data in a manageable way. So I think not including qualitative questions in our survey is going to make it more manageable. To consolidate and report that data. Now, what I do think is interesting, I would love to be able to track like direct correlations. Like I think I would love to see how people who did not plan on living here in 5 years felt about the cleanliness of their neighborhoods. Because I wonder if there's a correlation between a buy-in and how well you're maintaining your street. I think that would be interesting. That has nothing to do with this. I just think that would be cool.
Yeah, and at some point I had, it got lost in a laptop issue, but at some point I had basically an Excel sheet where you could toggle on it and say like, show me just Ward 4, or show me just people with kids, or show me just
Okay.
whatever.
This is very cool. You have a cool brain. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Was this your COVID project?
My COVID project after the micro park. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is incredibly helpful. I will say this was like my jumping off point for my campaign. Like this gave me a temperature check on Ward 1 in a really accessible and convenient. I kind of found this website before we had ever met. I found this website and was like, oh my God, this is like handing me all the information about this ward on a platter. That's so like that's so helpful. Gives you a lot of insight.
So when So Sam, back to the information that you're not as interested in.
It's not necessarily
Or not
information.
interested, I'm sorry,
It's the format of the question.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what would you,
Yes. So as opposed to doing an open-ended question that says, what's your favorite thing about your neighborhood? I would prefer to do, of the listed options, what is your number one priority for your neighborhood? And then give them, it is so difficult to track, for 200 people, it's manageable to track data for
But it-
open-ended questions. But if 9,000 people fill it out, having 9,000 single sentence answers that we have to like filter
Yeah.
through and find.
Oh,
ones
this
that
one's
mention
parks and this one's-
Yes, it's
I
just
see what
like
you're saying.
a huge undertaking. So I don't dislike the question, I just don't like the format for our purposes.
Yeah.
would you be comfortable having a comment space at the bottom if their item is not on there?
Maybe. I think that would open us up to similar issues, but
There was, just for what it's worth, like there were some of those, so let's say, like, I think with the police one, for example, like what could Norwood Fire Department do to be seen as more favorable in your eyes? So like, I think what you're saying is turn that into a radio instead of like an open-ended
yes,
or like a
yeah.
multiple choice.
Take all that apply, or
Yeah.
rank these 1 to 3, or
Yeah, I think my, like, it's a pain, but it's also like incredibly rich too. You know what I mean? So I think if you
Yeah.
picked like 2 or 3 spots, you know what I mean? Like, for example, like still living in Norwood in 5 years, you know, like if you were to move, what would be the most likely reason? You know what I mean? That might be, or like sort of at the end, there were like any other comments or concerns you have that like haven't come up in the survey.
I like the idea of doing any other comments or anything else you'd like for us to know. I feel like that could give us a lot of additional insight without necessarily being like pivotal to the results of the survey. Like that would give us a lot of additional information without necessarily needing it in order to, the purpose of the survey being a jumping off point for the city's master plan makes me want more statistics than in depth. You know what I mean? Like I would love to sit down and have a conversation with every resident, like in depth about how they feel about all these things. But in terms of like being able to manage the information and translate it into usable information, I would say having one open-ended question is as much as we could manage. And it would need to be something that was not 100% required for the survey to be successful.
So just sort of at the end, any other thoughts you'd like us to know?
Yeah. And I'm not saying I don't want to ask any of the questions that are here that are open-ended, but formatting them in either a rank these in terms of your priorities or tick all that apply to you. It's just too hard to track.
Are there any questions, like, I'm wondering, do we need the COVID question? Sorry, the COVID question was specifically, was asking pre or post pandemic, how are you feeling about your connectedness? I need to find it in here. I'm wondering if we're well, we are both far away and not.
I think mentioning COVID is going to be too polarizing. I would just not include anything like that.
I can't even find it on here now.
It's this one. Before COVID, how often do you participate in community
Yeah.
organizations or community activities? So I think you could probably just drop the like before COVID part and just say how often do you participate,
Yeah.
like currently?
What do you guys think about, like, do you guys think 51 questions or 50-ish questions is?
Something about 51, just how Jeff feels about prosperity is how
You don't
I
like
feel
51?
about it. Like just 50.
Well, except when now we're talking about adding, because you want to get age and,
Well, I don't think we need to necessarily copy the survey. I think we could take the
Pair it.
pieces that we feel are most relevant to building a master plan. Also, I don't want to just like.
I don't care.
well, and part of it is, part of the reason I'd like to at least have it be similar is I would like for us to be able to do at least a little bit of tracking.
In terms of how answers have changed, that would be hard unless we had a very similar sample size, though.
It was only,
If we go from 200 people to 9,000 people, then those answers are going
that's
to be
blowing
skewed
out the wall,
anyway.
yeah. Okay, good point.
But general trends would still be interesting. Just wouldn't be like.
I also think it could be interesting or beneficial if we're talking about master plan to look at some of the things in the document that Noah shared and try and cluster some questions into some of those categories.
Do you feel that the city staff operate with integrity? Do you feel respected in your interactions with police and fire, etc.? Things like that would be interesting.
And I don't think you guys need, I would agree that you just should focus on the time it takes to answer, not necessarily.
Right.
I think it'll be okay if it's a non-round number.
I mean, I guess they absolutely would. That's a
You'll
new
get by.
thing. I only put my TV volume in quantities of 5.
Oh my
so
God.
that's a me problem. That's not a y'all problem.
Everything's fives.
Is it?
If
Oh,
we
me
were,
too. It
in
needs to
5?
be.
if we were to do this, I understand, so John did it in a Google Drive, or in a Google form. I know we've got the Survey Monkey, which has a slightly, I would say, has more capacity.
It has
is
much
it?
more capacity.
And I also would really like to do a mix of trying to get responses from a lot of different places, and even having like a printed one available, although I guess we could.
I think we could do a printed copy here at City Hall and folks could come pick them up or request one be mailed to them. That'd be a lot of paper, but if folks wanted them, if that was the most accessible way to get it to them.
I also like the idea of doing QR codes in the parks and put that on socials,
The library.
the library, the businesses, the chamber.
What about like all the mailers that the tax department did?
So those have already gone out, and the city newsletter, I think, is about to go out as well. So
Just talking cost wise.
it's about $4,000, I think, is how much the tax department spent.
We could have a bake sale. Absolutely joking.
What about a blurb in water bills? They're getting mailed out anyway.
But what would the blurb be? Because we couldn't put a QR code. We could put a piece of paper with a QR code in it. But how many people get mailed bills rather than, mine's all online.
I get mine mailed. That's the neurodivergence in me. Email's not real.
So we could get that information. What would be, John, out of, from a scientific, my research years are, oh, okay. What would be a good sample? Isn't it like 10% is considered to be a successful sample
It
size?
depends on the population of Norwood. I'd have to run it. But
But isn't it 10%?
No.
No,
Like 20 would be generalizable.
20%.
So we'd be, if we're looking for a round number, we would say like 4,000.
Well, you also want to take age into consideration. Those that are under, 5 aren't going to.
Oh, valid.
Right. Like, if you think about just like voter
Or
counts,
households.
like
Right.
If we are doing one survey per household, then that does cut that number down quite a bit. Are we doing one survey per household? What about multi-unit households?
per address.
Per email?
Everyone has an email.
In SurveyMonkey, you can limit it to 1 per IP address,
Right.
Oh.
which means multiple people in the same household could take it.
But, well, that they could not.
They could, because it would to their device.
So my laptop has a different IP address than my husband's who's sitting next to me?
In
Yes.
theory.
But if you have if you have individuals who are completing it,
The
going
same
to the
router.
library, the first one there is going to be able to complete it, and the rest are going to get this has already been completed error.
You're also bound to have people who are like using a VPN because they're on their work computer and that
Right.
would change it. I feel like per address feels reasonable. You have to input your address, one per address.
Then it's
Yeah, but then it's not,
not anonymous.
yeah.
Well,
You will drastically reduce your return rate if you make it. mean, that's one of the benefits of a 10-minute questionnaire is who's going to sit there and fill out a 10-minute questionnaire multiple
5
times?
times.
Oh, valid. Yeah.
It is a real time suck.
Interesting.
Lots to think about.
Thank you for
There
sharing
are
this.
there are tools if you run it through SPSS to validate responses to make sure that somebody didn't
Just do
duplicate
that.
the. Yeah, it's not perfect, but
Can you, I wasn't able to get this, the actual survey. I could just get to the space that had it. Can you share that document with us?
Sure.
That-
Yeah, happy to share all this. I don't
call it the John-
feel any
John
great
Moore.
intellectual ownership of this. No, I think in general, I'm just happy to do it. Happy that anybody cares that I did it, and happy that you guys want to do something. Because that was really the idea. Is like, I think at the time the city probably didn't have the council didn't have like the, this wasn't on the radar. So I think just like, let me see if I can do it. If there's any value in it, steal away.
I found it to be tremendously, when I read it way back when, and I read every single comment, and it was really interesting. I also am really heartened by a lot of the improvements that we've already made. That just feels really good. But I encourage anyone at home to take a look at it. It's not, 200 responses, it's not everyone, but I think it's a really good snapshot of what's happening, where are the successes, where are the challenges, and where's the opportunity. Yeah.
If you would email this to us, that would be great.
Sure.
So are we still hoping for July to have something?
Out. The parade.
July 2nd, I believe, was the.
That's not really long after Pride for Mrs. Bowling to have fully recovered.
If anyone else would like to step in,
I'll continue to work on it.
I have some time that I'm happy to dedicate.
And I'll check about
Part of our goal was to have this completed before
council
back to
office,
school season,
clerk's
and
office
at the beginning of
purchasing
the
a
season,
Survey Monkey.
get some
Yeah,
flyers home with
because-
kids
Yeah.
to encourage parents.
I know
At that time of year, we figure they're still really looking at paperwork.
the
that
one
gets sent
we
to
use
them.
at work that has
Feels doable.
full
Yeah.
functionality. There's a lot of stuff you can do as far as filtering and
Do either of you have Survey Monkey?
I have access to Qualtrics doing KU faculty, but John and Ms. Franzen have something similar to it.
Okay. I know that she and I both have, or no, she let hers expire, but I accidentally renewed my Survey Monkey Pro. So I have that, which I have for a year. So you guys, anyone's welcome to log on. I think I can get like 4 users on it or something.
Let's set a designated time, put it on the calendar. There will be no crises anywhere around it. And we will go through.
You, me, and Mr. Gerton?
I get volunteer.
I don't know. Did you
got
say? I thought I
voluntold?
saw your hand. No. Oh, you just said you knew stuff.
you can put me on that
Oh, okay.
Fabulous.
because I have all the Survey Monkey fun
Let's do that.
nerdiness
Let's set a day.
Right.
of it.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
here.
so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Any questions or advice for us as we
yeah.
begin building and surveying?
If there's any questions that you would rewrite or anything you would add, that might be very helpful to throw into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said, some of the demographic stuff, some of the communication stuff. I hear the aspiration to get it under 51. Like honestly, I think when I started out, I was probably at like 79 or something, and like cut a third of it. So I think that is a challenge. But no, I'm excited that you guys are doing it, or at least talking about doing it, and. Yeah, I think thinking about the back end in the sense of like this not going into a black box, you know what I mean? But like how does it live? Sort of similar to how I shared this back out. like with residents, that, you know, is on the city website or whatever, such that people can see it and it's, filterable or, whatever, and there, that you could longitudinally sort of go back and see, oh, wow, the city is evolving, or, and then I think also giving people an on-ramp to get involved. You know what I mean? For example, like, oh, I really care about the parks, the rating was such and such in my ward, I want to help be a park volunteer or something.
So I'm glad you said that. City of Loveland, I was looking at theirs, which I really liked. It's a much shorter survey, but they do it I think it's every single year, and it's posted online. So you do see that longitudinal shift. And the other thing that I really liked on one of them, I don't think it was on Loveland's, it's this one, University Park, Illinois. It said, would you like to participate in other community planning activities? Yes or no? And then if yes, here's your contact info, which I thought could be really a good way to, get more people. Oh, you're interested in community art. Here's some projects going on with that. Oh, you're interested in community gardening. Hey, here's all these opportunities here. So I think that could be a real resource to get people connected to things that are already happening. But so it could still be anonymous, but then you have the opportunity to say, I do want my name.
We could even have a link to a sign-up form so that it's not affiliated necessarily with
the
your
survey?
Within
survey
SurveyMonkey, you can have it linked to a separate survey so that
That would be good.
because if it's in that one SurveyMonkey, you're going to be able to filter it and identify their questions. So you could add another survey link in there at the end that says, are you interested, I don't know, however you want to word it, but basically taking them to a different survey.
Okay.
So they're two separate things. So one is just the name and address and what you're interested in, and the other one is all the survey data.
Sweet. Sounds like you know your Survey Monkeys.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
We can just skip this next bullet point. We can come back to that one
So
next month.
new council orientation, we'll keep that on
Yes.
for the next.
We're gonna get around to it, I swear.
We'll circle
The
back.
good news is it only impacts people in this room right now, so.
And not even,
Correct.
because none of us are new anymore.
Right.
I feel new.
All right. Then.
I'm
master
sorry.
Plan for the city.
I'm sorry,
What?
real quick, I've got one more question for Mr.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Mr.
So I'm making a list of other places besides door to door. QR code and school flyers, parks, senior center, rec center, city hall, chamber of commerce. Any other things?
We mentioned the parade.
Oh,
We did.
I forgot about that. Ooh, that's.
Because that
coming
was,
up.
that's why the goal was to have it ready.
In July.
Yes.
Yeah, I would think about email signatures of city officials, elected or administrative. I would think about the YouTube description for the official broadcast.
NCT.
Yeah, on community television.
And I wonder if we could put it, if you tune in to NCT before the meeting begins, there's just like a saving screen that says meeting will begin at 7:30.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
we
the
could
QR
throw a QR
code.
code on there too.
While you're waiting.
You're already looking at it.
You already got things you want to say to us. Love that. See, I'm glad I made you.
Could also put that on, within NCT, is it channel 4 or channel 8 where they run?
A link on the YouTube and a QR code on the TV.
Well, yeah, actually on
Yeah.
a Spectrum.
Okay, thank you. All right, no. If you have any other ideas, text me.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, so new council orientation, we have nothing new to report on that one. Master plan for the city. I'm going to assume that this will become part of that master plan, if not the,
And the survey is kind of the starting point. So
And what might be
a starting point.
I'm just,
Starting points.
I'm curious. So I have this ongoing, where is it? It's my current priorities, which is totally unorganized. But I could like literally put each one of these under one of the headings. I'm wondering if that would be, like, I know you're spending all your time on finance, or, that would be the steward of community resources, right?
Well, it
Probably.
would hit several.
Yeah, and probably also,
All of it. Infrastructure.
yeah.
Recreation. Yeah. Real interconnectedness with these goals.
I'm just thinking, I feel like we're all working on things, and I don't know. I think we need to find better ways of sharing that to the community. Sneeze. Excuse me. For example, Candace really wants to work on trees. And so we're talking to Donna Lake, and we're talking, starting conversations with the tree board. But if Alexis doesn't know that, maybe she's spending time on trees. So I guess I want to be sure that we all kind of have a sense of what we're working on. And
we have this thing in the council meetings that it's labeled new business or unfinished business. If you would like to share that
well, okay.
in there with any accompanying PowerPoint slides.
Mr. President. And I think that can be one tool, but I think that having it, because I don't think we've talked about trees on council yet, because she and I are starting the conversation, so it hasn't hit that level yet. So I'm thinking it might be helpful to kind of.
Here, do like an update.
You could do that.
An update
You could
or actually have it written down. on a
determine
thing.
a committee that you would like to have that discussed in, so that you can then report, you can also report that out.
It feels like just another layer of.
Well, I think the legality surrounding letting everybody else on council know what city business you're currently working on is pretty touchy.
It also then gives you the opportunity, if you've discussed it in a committee and you've then reported it out, it does give you the opportunity to elaborate on that even more during the motion once a motion has been made to accept that committee report, to have that further discussion on that topic.
What I will say too is, and this comes back into new council orientation, so really this does all kind of circle back together. When I started on council, it was never made clear to me what new business or unfinished business was intended for, like as an agenda point, like what qualifies as that. So maybe setting that expectation that like whatever projects you're currently working on, if you're just getting something started, if you're looking for people who are interested, like setting that expectation that that's when we bring it up, that's when it's discussed. If you just want to let other people know that you're in the beginning state. Because like for me, I don't feel comfortable bringing things up there unless it's like fully fleshed out, definite project. But maybe that's like our designated time to talk about like, hey, we're beginning a discussion regarding so-and-so, please reach out to me if you'd like to contribute, or something like that. I just think there's no like designated way.
would it help if each chair just says, we have a list, this is currently what's in committee? So you and like, if there's an individual who's like specifically like, hey, we want to work on our tree cover, and that's in Parks and Candace, and, and then it's just kind of however, but if that would help of like, this is what's currently still in committee.
My concern about that is like, there's a lot of things that people work on individually. Like, there's a lot of things that you work on that don't land in committee, that Susan works on that don't land in committee. So like, where do we report those? Like, how do we know what individual projects you're working on?
And that's something you can throw out on, you, that would be a place for new business. I mean, that's,
I mean, I don't have any projects that I've worked on that hasn't been in committee.
Maybe Susan's just my example then. But like, there's plenty of things that Susan has done that don't land in a committee that have just been like Susan taking the initiative to work on something with a resident or with a different city department.
Like the tree thing, we're starting the conversation, but that's not in committee yet.
But it
So
will be.
It will be.
Yeah.
But we're starting the conversation, so
Yeah.
would it be, but we have to do quite a bit of work before it's going to get to the infrastructure committee.
Yeah.
So at what point, and so I guess I just want folks to be able to know, hey, these are the things that are coming down the pike. These are things that are being worked on, but they're not yet in committee.
Can we do like a pre-business? That sounds stupid, but you know what I mean? Like, can we add an agenda item to council meetings that's just like upcoming projects or?
that would qualify
would be
for
new
new business.
All right, I'll just keep
Okay.
talking a lot in new business.
Well, I do think, to Sam's point, there's room for better understanding about procedures in meetings. Because, for instance, the food truck ordinance, sometimes we discuss in the motion, and sometimes we discuss after the motion.
Yeah.
And I'm so confused as to what our norm is because we don't have one. And so I'm not complaining, well, I am complaining because there's just confusion about when does this council have discussion?
So just in general, a motion, so public hearing aside, I mean, that was for those to speak for and against, for whatever it is. We're going to have them with the tax budget coming up. And then there will, later on in the agenda, there will be an ordinance regarding the tax budget, just like there was with food trucks. But in order for council to have that discussion, a motion and a second has to be made before any type of discussion on that matter.
So I feel like we normally talk after we've made the motion and the second to read the ordinance, because where's the opportunity to talk between reading it and then making a motion to pass it? So I feel like most of the time we have our discussion regarding the ordinance after we've make a motion on the reading, but
Correct.
before we vote on the reading.
Yes, and so during that discussion is where the originator of the motion and the individual who seconded the motion can move to amend their motion for something else. But in order for that discussion to take place, you do have to have that first and the second.
So, for instance, with the food truck ordinance, proposed ordinance, in the past, there have been times where we have made the motion and voted on the motion without any kind of discussion.
Correct.
So then what would have happened last meeting, if I'm reading the room correctly, we would have voted down the ordinance if we do it like we typically done. Because if there was a motion, we passed the motion to have the reading, and then we would have voted against the reading. But instead,
No, look, it's,
It was moved into committee.
if,
I know
But yes.
but it's like typically, like, if we said, yeah, just have the first reading, that's us not saying we're for or against it. It's just saying, let's continue the conversation.
But then there can't be any conversation had. I think Jeff's point is once we have the reading, there is no opportunity for conversation because there's no motion on the floor.
So the process, there's a motion, there's a second, and then I'll ask if there's any discussion. That's with every motion except for a motion to table and the motion to adjourn. There is no discussion during those. Every other motion, pretty much, there are some other exceptions, but for the purpose of agenda items, every motion will have a first, a second, and any discussion.
I think Jeff's point is then you have to have the discussion before you have the reading, because once you have the reading, the motion is either going to be to pass or fail.
That's after the third reading.
Yeah.
Sure, but point being, if we have first reading of an ordinance, I vote we have the reading, I second that motion. Any discussion? Now we have to have the discussion. We cannot have the reading and then discuss. The discussion
Correct,
has to
because
be before
We
the
can have
reading.
another, there's another chance to discuss when we vote to pass or,
But
Yes.
that's only at the end of the third one.
right.
Correct.
And I meant conversation as
Yeah, that-
I opened it, like, we have 2 more council meetings.
Right.
So there's time.
It's 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 options for discussion, in theory, right, unless we do an emergency.
Right, there's technically 4 votes on every ordinance. There's a first reading, a second reading, a third reading, and
And then
pass.
the pass.
So if we don't pass the first reading, does it go to the second reading?
If we voted not to read
If,
it.
if you don't have the first reading, you can't move to have the second.
But then it just dies.
Correct.
Okay.
Or do you have another?
We have to
I need
have,
to do this remedially for a second. So on the agenda item, we have the food truck ordinance.
Correct.
Somebody says, I make a motion that we have the first reading. Somebody seconds it. We then had a discussion in which somebody encouraged the original motion to be amended.
Correct.
What if we hadn't done that?
If there would, if
If we voted to have.
there was no discussion, or if you're saying the vote, the original motion stood to have the first reading.
Let's say we have the original motion stands, we have the first reading, and then we vote on that.
Yes, and
then we
majority
vote
is
no.
no,
What happens then?
then that ordinance, that motion, there is no reading.
Will it be on the agenda at the next meeting for the first reading again?
I think we could,
I think it could be, but it'd be
it
kind
could
of
be
silly.
brought back.
Right.
Yes.
See, that's my question. I'm not.
It
saying
does not by default come back.
Right. I'm not saying that we did anything wrong Tuesday, but I just get confused because sometimes we discuss in the motion part and sometimes we discuss right before the vote. Yeah.
So, correct, because there are some ordinances where, I'll say appropriations, typically suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. And so someone will make the motion, there's a second, is there any discussion? No, call the roll, please. Passes. Motion to pass the ordinance. There's a second, any discussion? Somebody raises their hand. There's those comments, that discussion could have also taken place during the motion to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. It really does not matter in some instances where the comments or the discussion takes place. But those are the 2 opportunities if we're suspending the rules to have that discussion. One is during the motion to suspend the rules. The other one is following the motion to pass.
But you're right, there's not consistency.
Right. And so my point, despite how the food truck ordinance ended up one way or the other, if we do it the way we've done it in other times by random chance, we could have been stuck being forced to vote down the first reading. And it wouldn't have had a chance to be amended.
In theory, we could have voted no to read, and then someone could have motioned to put it in committee, right? Or would that have already got rid of it?
We have to deal with a motion to vote for or set or against the reading.
Right, so if we voted no, could someone then motion to put it in committee? Or is it gone? at that point?
I think I believe you can still put it back in committee.
So we could have voted,
Somebody could have made it, yeah.
yeah. Someone
I'm just saying,
That would
We
not
need
have stopped anyone.
consistency.
Right.
so that we know when we're having discussion, there may be things that I don't bring up because, hey, I'm fine having the motion
Right.
and we bring this to the floor, but yeah.
I don't know if we could make it more. I feel like it's like a find out live sometimes. Because I know sometimes people have questions after we have a discussion for reading. Like I know someone will see something. Like I think everyone on this committee's or on the council's done it where we're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
that I missed or forgot. So I think like the more chances to discuss it, the better, if I'm being honest. Because
Then having it at 3
'Cause we're
different
human and
council
we
meetings
get
where you have
confused.
2 weeks in between them, and
Yeah.
people are able to like, oh, pay attention. I heard this, like,
Yeah.
and then they reach out to us with questions or admin. We have questions. We kind of dig into it a little bit more. So then every council meeting, we kind of come back with, hey, this is the questions that were asked or the information that we found.
So then the way I'm interpreting what we're saying is we should lean into the discussion on the motion.
I
consistent.
think reading is fine.
On the motion for readings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hey, so Candace says I want to have a motion to have the first reading. Susan seconded the food truck. Alexis seconded the food truck.
I wanted to start the discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So that's why.
we should lean into when we have the motion on the floor. That's a good time to start discussion. Nobody should wait.
Yes.
Unless
Unless you don't want it.
Unless there is nothing to
Unless-
discuss or
yeah.
you don't have any questions or comments or concerns or anything. I feel like that's what happens most of the time. Like, I feel like the only, at least in my experience, really the only times where we have no discussion is when it's like fairly cut and dry and no one has really any questions or concerns.
And it should also, it should say on that cover sheet, like what the timeline, if they want, if it is somewhat of an emergency and they need all three readings that night, that should be included in that cover sheet that accompanies all of the ordinances and resolutions as well.
the emergency clauses have to be a supermajority.
To suspend the rules.
To suspend the rules and have all three readings, not necessarily the emergency clause. Emergency clauses are written in, like the appropriations ordinance, that emergency clause is written into the ordinance.
We do not have to have a supermajority.
The instance where you need the supermajority is to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Yes. Because a lot of those ordinances already have that emergency clause is written in. So rarely would you have to include and declare an emergency in your motion. Typically, the motion is going to be to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance or of the resolution. Because that emergency piece is already noted, it should be in the caption. Again, I go back to appropriations. It's typically change appropriations for 2024 and declare an emergency.
Sort of along those lines, one of my tabs is I pulled up procedure because I'm aware both with this and with Victory Park, I think some of our neighbors didn't understand the process, and they thought that voting yes for the reading was the same as voting yes for the ordinance. And I think when I pulled this up, I read it, and this is off of our website, Civic Plus or whatever. But I can read it and I understand because I'm on council and I've done it for a hot minute. But I don't think if I were a resident, this would make sense to me. And I actually was talking to Natalie Assif and talked about making this more readable for regular folks, because I think that might be helpful for people to have a clearer understanding of what exactly the process is, because I think that has caused some unhappiness because they didn't understand what was, people were thinking we were voting on the food trucks that night. And I suppose we could have declared an emergency and pushed it through. Nobody here was going to do that. And I think that that's part of why that elevated energy was because they were, people were afraid for their livelihood. And it's like, no, it's all good, slow. This is the process. And so it's sort of both. So I'm wondering if there's a way we could make this accessible. I don't know if we have copies out, but I'm wondering if there's a.
Well, back to the food truck thing and processes, I think some of the confusion or the lack of clarity and misstatements that were out there was that council was looking to ban food trucks, when really council was taking action on proposed text that came out of the planning commission.
I just think that was a press issue more than anything else. Like, there were multiple news articles out that said Norwood City Council
But that came.
considers banning food trucks.
But that came from a resident who
Sure.
felt that was the case.
And I
They
think
might have
that,
wanted
like,
to do their due.
an accessible thing that we could do would be to print off like a very short and sweet guide to the processes of making an ordinance law and have that up here that just says like a first reading, a second reading, a third reading, a final vote. And that could be available next to the request to speak. But ultimately, like, I feel we remind people pretty frequently during council meetings what that process looks like. And I don't know how to phrase this in a way, that is appropriate. I want people to understand it. I want the information to be accessible. I think that the burden lies on constituents and citizens to navigate that. And I think we can make that information accessible. I do not know that having that information provided will give really any better understanding.
People may not necessarily
I think
be
that
coming for a
if
civics lesson.
people don't engage with that information, if people aren't prepared to receive a civics lesson,
Just
I
fair
think
enough.
that confusion and misinformation probably exists at every city council and in fact every organization that operates under Robert's rules. And I would argue, like, I really do think that that persists everywhere. I don't think
Yeah.
that's at Norwood's. I think it's
Oh,
a
I don't-
confusing process
Oh,
unless you work in the city.
I think we've all like called our reps and like, I'm like, I don't know exactly where this bill is at this moment, but you better, you
No,
know.
especially when
right.
it's a 6-week process. Like, yeah, you wherever you land when you figure this information out. And I think for me, it's important to note that, like, as a resident, wherever in this process we are, when you tap into it, when you want to come address it,
You're there to address it.
you're there to address it, and I'm going to hear you equally no matter what point in this process we're at. So
true.
I want us to keep taking those moments throughout to explain, like, just to clarify. And I know that that's like sort of out of order. Like, I know that addressing the crowd is sort of out of order, but I feel that it's, I don't make the rules and I don't enforce them, so I don't know why it matters that I feel it's permissible. But I feel it's permissible because it's helping people engage and clarifying the process for them. And I like that we take those moments and do that. I do think that in those moments is often when emotions are at their peak, and I don't know that people are prepared to hear at those moments. Anyway, that was a lot of me talking to say that I'm not really sure how we could make this more clear for people, but also I think that, like,
I think we could put out a Robert's, something that just does a quick layout and
I
put it on
want
the
like
table.
the I'm just a bill version, you know?
I don't know if we have those skills.
I think it should rhyme.
And
I think
also
if
that,
it doesn't
that
rhyme,
song
I'm
misses
gonna
a lot of
reject it.
steps.
Oh, that does.
Song does.
It does make it look a lot easier
Yeah.
than it is.
I'd like to point out that we're near 8 o'clock and we're technically on item 4.
Out of?
5. 6
No,
if you
we're on
count.
5.
Not really, because Noah was listed as 2, so really,
Oh, right.
And I feel like right now we are talking about standard operating procedures for council.
That's true.
I agree, but didn't technically move that.
we never moved out of master plan.
We're fluid.
I mean, I'm just saying, I want to be cognizant of time.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to look into that with Miss Natalie,
all right.
our version of I'm just a bill.
I'm in full support of having a little sheet of paper
little
that
cheat
provides a cheat sheet for the process of a.
And I think some of that, you may have, not just the first, second, third reading, and then passage. I feel like you almost need another
Like a tree.
branch.
If then,
Yeah.
Yes, for if a public hearing.
if it.
Because there are requirements for the public hearing that need to take place.
Wait, what's
that
that?
prior
Tree.
also.
Tree,
Like a
which one?
yes/no tree situation.
Yes.
Called a tree.
And I think having, like, if you're requesting to address council, you can speak when the agenda item comes up, or you can speak during the general request to address council.
Yes, but during a public hearing, it is during the
Right,
public.
aside from during public hearing,
Right.
but just in general at a regular council meeting.
Yes, which I made clear
do.
during the,
I imagine it will come up again in the future, and so it might
Right.
be important to note. You can speak now, or you can wait until the relevant item is on the agenda.
correct.
What do you call that tree thing?
We'll have to
Decision tree?
Decision tree
Didn't know that.
or a flow chart.
I was gonna say a flow chart. All right.
All right. So we're good with master plan. We have our comments, talking points. Standard operating procedures for council.
I feel we've addressed all.
I do too.
I think that.
I
Been a
think,
couple-
sort of along your lines, Jeff, when you're talking about consistency, I think it'd be really nice if whenever an item is up, that we have a little paragraph, someone says, this is what this is. And I know we all sometimes kind of take turns, or sometimes it's like, I'm tired of doing my voice and I don't, right? But I think that's super helpful, and I think that can also give a little more, John Moore was showing people have a sense of what are we doing with the money? And if we can be more clear, okay, this $465,000 is going for these 3 trucks and this is why, and da-da-da-da. I think if we could take just those moments to do that. I don't know if that would be a council member doing that, if it would be, even if it's reading the, that back sheet,
The cover sheet.
the cover sheet, like it's on the back.
It does come after.
Yeah.
But it
The
is
cover
called
sheet,
the cover sheet.
the cover sheet that's at the end.
That's why she's a lawyer.
I'm repeating what our president said.
It is a cover sheet.
In
It
the
is
back,
referenced.
the end.
Well, yes, but that
The
is
placement
what
doesn't
is-
defeat the title.
That is what is, that cover sheet is technically what helps to create the ordinance or the resolution.
Right. Is that something
That predates, so yes,
Natalie
it's a,
could read, or would we just say,
that would come up under discussion, I think.
I think we do a pretty good job, like reading them.
I think we do too.
Yeah.
I feel like we all stay on top of like if citizens could possibly have a concern about why we're declaring this an emergency, here's the reason why we've been asked to suspend the rules. Here's why.
I think we do it about 50% of the time. I'm just wondering if we should try to do it 100% of the time, or do folks feel like 50%, we're doing it for the ones that seem important?
I mean, there are several options. If, one of two things, you could have someone kind of give a summary, or if the individual who requested it is in council chambers, you can request that they step forward to ask questions or provide an overview, which in some instances, you all usually have no issues with
Yeah.
asking
I
that they
also
step
think, like,
forward.
I don't know, I can't speak for y'all, but I have never received any kind of communication from a resident that said, I don't understand why you all suspended the rules and had all 3 readings and like, you know what I mean?
Or
I
if
think,
they have, it's been live.
I think we've preemptively addressed things that could be, I think if there's a large dollar amount at play, if it's a large purchase or contract or something like that, I don't see that as a pressing issue. I have at least not received any feedback.
I think we all prioritize the transparency thing.
And I guess from,
Communication.
and this is sort of the only thing I'm thinking, I've not either had anyone specifically reach out to me. I'm thinking more about the people that aren't reaching out, the people that are confused or misunderstood and then spread that information. I guess that's more, I think that's more of, I'm trying to get the people who, I'm just trying to get more information out. That's all, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And not everyone is going to take the time. I think the people that are,
I think what you're concerned about may be coming from.
No, not necessarily that level, just people who just don't understand what's going on.
I don't think that
because
those
they-
people are going to gain any more clarity from us taking a moment to explain it.
Or the information's there. If you want to
Yeah,
find
absolutely.
it, it's there. If you want the facts and the data, it's accessible.
And if anyone has concerns about why.
And I have had some people like reach out and be like, "Hey, I couldn't find that ordinance you guys read. Can you send it to me?"
yeah,
And
I've done
here it is. I mean, I have had that a few times, but I feel like the individuals who want to know the details
Well,
We'll reach out.
will, and it's
Or I hope they will.
accessible.
They're
And then-
listening, please reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have had some people that have been trying to sign up for a sunshine list and are kind of confused, and I have to like send them the link and the exact location. And that is one thing that has come up a few times where it's like, it's really hard to figure
it's a
out. and,
two-step
like,
process. It's awful.
so if there's something we could do for that, because to me that's big. I'm like, sign up for sunshine list. You get all the information. But I've had some people come and be like, I couldn't figure it out.
On
I'm done.
on that note, there is a little confusion from what I understand. the clerk of council sometimes sends it to her personal created listserv, and then sometimes to Civic, or always to Civic Plus. And I think sometimes people are not on both lists.
You mean,
I know somebody who gets the agenda items, but missed an agenda for the food truck for our last meeting because it didn't go out to one of the listservs, but it went out to the Civic Plus listserv.
it should be, that they should be utilizing, there is a single Sunshine List grouper. It shouldn't matter whether it is through Civic Plus or a direct email. It should be the same one.
Okay.
I know for a fact that emails, some of the Civic Plus have gone to junk. I've also had, yes, because I was sending a bunch of the emails through my city email and my personal email is on Sunshine List. I was a little paranoid that none of the emails went out because they weren't showing up in my personal email. And then after the fact, I looked and it was in the junk. So definitely checking junk and spam, I think would be helpful if individuals are noticing that they are receiving one and not the other, because it should be going out to it's the same group. I don't believe we have we should not have multiple lists for Sunshine. It's the only one. It's like,
I will send that back to them. Thank you.
Is it feasible, or is there someone we could speak with on that accessibility of signing up for Sunshine?
So that would be, that's through the Civic Plus platform.
Yeah.
So Norcom runs it, and so the way you do it, you have to go all the way down to the bottom, and it's in teeny tiny letters, and it says
Yeah.
newspaper sign up, newsletter sign up, and then you go in and you click. I'm saying this now for folks at home.
Yeah.
And you put in your email, but then you have to go back to your email and accept it.
And that
And
puts you
that's
on.
the part that a lot of people are like, oh, I signed up. But because it's that two-step process,
think
a
there's
lot of folks.
I think that is there in order to stop people from like spamming. I don't think that's that uncommon of a process.
if they send an email
Verification
to
email.
council@norwoodohio.gov
Newsletter?
and say, can you please add me to the Sunshine List? They should be able to just add
That's
me
what I
to the
usually.
Sunshine List.
I usually do that. The whole newsletter, that's confusing. Like, oh, newsletter. That's not to me like I'm getting all the agendas 24 hours before.
Correct.
So-
Correct.
And I mean, there is a newsletter that does go out. So to me, that would be like, oh, I'm just signing up for the newsletter. I'm not signing up for Sunshine.
And I think those
But
are two
you're-
different things.
So you can sign up for the
Council.
city council meetings, agenda,
Yeah.
finance, housing.
I don't know. Maybe just the. I
You
don't
just
know.
have, but you have to individually click.
Yeah.
Maybe we change the wording of the link from newsletter to agendas or meeting updates or sunshine list or something like that. Because newsletter is really misleading. I don't want a newsletter, but I do want to know what city business is going on.
So communication sign up.
Yeah.
We might be, I don't know if
I don't know.
Norcom can do that, but some of the things are set and some of them you can shift. Also a little link I never saw before, email the city of Norwood. Due to info.
Does that cover everything?
all
Any
I got.
other items under?
Just to kind of summarize, I really like the survey thing. I think that it's a great thing, and I think it's something that we all can manage. The master plan, I'm still kind of set on like, we need to bring in a third party. It needs to be like contracted, which might be down the line. And there might be some small things that we can do. But I really like that outside third party coming in. 'Cause it's big, and I want it to be done well and right and all of that. Not that none of us could do that, but just the scale of it. Like, again, I think the survey is a great place to start. But a master plan to me is a third party coming in, doing negotiations, like really, making sure every voice is heard and communicated thoroughly and all that. So
I agree. I also think somebody coming in who doesn't have the inherent biases that we all have help us make something that's like as fair as possible.
yeah.
And yeah, it's a massive undertaking. I think if none of us had full-time jobs, we could probably come up with a fantastic master plan all on our own. But I think given given everyone's commitments, I think it's such a large project that we want to last for so long and to be so successful, and it's so far-reaching that I would also like to see a dedicated.
Who does those? That wouldn't be like JMA or Stantec. Who does those?
I think we looked last term
Yeah,
at some companies.
Spoke, Jerry, he used to be the Cincinnati city, and Julie Zimmerman. He had do you know who I'm talking about? I don't want to butcher his last name. He's retired from the city of Cincinnati and started his own consulting company that basically does this. He also helps, like, and I'm saying this, but they've helped cities all over the country, like, that might want to transition to a charter. They come in, they do master plans for a city. They are like the third-party negotiators. I think they might have recently gotten bought out, but there are literally companies who do this. I think when they first approached the city in 2020, their quote, again, I spoke to them 2022, was around 30 to 40,000. And this was in the beginning of 2020. So, but yes, there are companies that do it, and kind of help build that plan. And I think Gulf Manor, we were talking to them, just had somebody come in and do it. And I mean, we've had amazing, like, students and like build these projects and things like that, but a master plan is a living plan that has to continually be updated. And so that's my concern. Like, I don't want to come in and just be like, this is it. And then a year from now, it's just like, look, it's like, okay, this is what we have to do to continue for it to thrive and move forward as the city moves forward. So it is, I mean, it's an expense, but I think it's something to keep on our radar if and when.
Is it something that we should start considering for the next budget cycle?
I think so. I think just looking at the budget and everything, we're at that point where spending money on something like this will help us. It'll be
Spend
worth
money
it.
in the future
Yeah.
wisely.
Where we know we're already kind of doing, like, these grants are coming in, hey, but we have to have X amount of money to match it. We know in 2-3 years this is going to happen. And this is in our plan to have it in the budget to be able to apply for this grant so we can match it. Like,
That just sounds so lovely.
so that's where my mind goes with it. But also, police, fire, like things that are a lot of our budget, having a master plan for them, especially as things increase and all that. So again, there's so many variables and facets and resident input and, the survey, like, I think it'd be great at one point if we can do a master plan, like, hey, here's our data. Like, we've been, and there was, the CNU thing. Like, we have all this data that I feel like it's just out there, and we're like, oh, well, where it could be like, oh, we're focusing on trees and walkability. Well, let's pull out this program that was graciously done for us and all that. So.
And that's kind of my goal with the survey, is like to give us priority points to hand over to an organization who's assisting us with this, to say, like, here's what matters to our community, here's what matters to our citizens, here's what matters to us. Now let's take this and build off of it. Yeah, I agree. I think we do need to, getting some updated quotes and trying to allot for that in the next budget would be very wise. I think the longer we take to do this, the more expensive it's going to get.
Things aren't getting cheaper.
They are not, that is certain. I want us to continue to be more and more financially successful, and I think that having a master plan is going to lead to that.
Is there anything we could do now to prepare us for that? Like, would it be having some names of people, or would it be, we just need to consider next budget, this is something that's a priority for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think having everyone on board, you know, obviously the mayor, Mr. Powers, like, you know, it impacts everybody. Do we as a city in a whole get the quotes, you know, go through that process, but see, okay, is everyone on board to spend this amount of money? And make sure we all are on board, because again, I don't want X amount of us to go through all this work and then just be like, yeah.
Not interested, yeah.
So, so I don't know what would come first. I don't think it would cost a lot of energy and time, but I want to, you know, there's a certain way we have to reach out to individuals. So maybe starting there. But yeah, everyone, you know, department heads, everyone has to kind of be on board for it.
All right. Any other items? Q&A.
What's for dinner?
Already ate
What'd you make?
beef barbecue. Started it at 7 o'clock this morning.
You didn't even invite us over.
Yeah, that's kind of rude.
But did you send anyone else pictures?
Didn't send anybody pictures of it.
Motion we adjourn.
I feel we should learn.
Motion we adjourn.
My blood sugar
We don't,
dropped.
we don't need a motion. When I have nothing to,
No gavel, we're gavelless.
nope, nope. All right. There was nothing else?
Nothing else.
Okay.
It's productive.
It was.
This meeting is over. We will see you at the next council meeting.
Well,
So